We're here at the Ironman World Champs in St. George, and this is Lionel Sanders' Canyon Speedmax CF SLX. And you'll notice it's not the top of the range Canyon Speedmax CFR. So, has Lionel Sanders chosen the wrong bike? We're sitting here with Wolfgang Cole, product engineer for Canyon, and we're going to have a discussion about Lionel Sanders' bike choice for the Ironman World Champs. Has he made the right decision? Has he bought the wrong bike? Or has his emotion and perception of the course affected his judgment, and is he not listening to the scientists? Before we get started, let's talk about why we're even having this discussion. For the first time in history, the Ironman World Champs is not in Hawaii. It's in St. George because of the pandemic, and that means it's on a pretty hilly course. There's 2,248 meters of climbing on this bike course, and it's got people wondering, how much is weight going to be an issue? How much is aerodynamics going to be an issue? And which one should you be erring on? Lionel has obviously decided that weight is going to be very important on this course. But is it going to be important? I mean, the course is substantial. Let's bring Wolfie in and we're going to talk about it. It's a tough course. So how much climbing do you actually need? I mean, if you talk to the UCI guys, they're going, you only need a road bike when it's a pure uphill time trial. Is that the same for triathletes?
Yeah, I mean, the difference is that we have actually minus 100 meter of climbing. So we have a round course with several loops.
Yeah, that's
and there are big mountains between them. But every meter you climb, you have to descend as well. And this is making a big difference.
And that's a good point on this particular course. So we have two big climbs. There's Gunlock Drive and there's Snow Canyon, which we actually climbed the other day. But there's also lots of other climbs. There's lots of little rollers and little kickers the whole way through the course. There's not a lot of flat on this course, in fact. But there are two very long and potentially very fast descents. These descents from the top of the climbs are going to be fast. I mean, we're talking an average maybe of over 60, even 70 kilometers an hour if the wind's the right direction on race day. They're going to be very, very fast. And the faster you go, the more aerodynamics plays a role. So then the weight doesn't make a difference. But how much climbing do you need to do before it does make a difference? Well, that's what we're going to discuss today. So we're going to dive into the numbers. Okay, well, that's the course that we're comparing, but we're also comparing bikes because Lionel has chosen the Canyon Speedmax SLX, the TT version, over the newer, released in November 2020, Canyon Speedmax CFR, disc brake version. So he's got rim brakes, he's got the UCI TT version, not even the triathlon version, which is lighter, but it is costing him 7 to 9 watts, is that right?
The bike only is 7 to 9 watts depending on the size. For Jan and size large, we have 9 watts gain, and size small is around 7 watts. Yeah.
Okay, but it's not just about those watts. I mean, obviously everyone knows there's a whole lot of factors that go into that in the real world, how much savings. And one of the major factors is your position. But Lionel's actually tested his position, and it's more, not less, that he's losing. The difference in those two bikes is closer to 18 watts on his track test. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. They made a track test with his fitter, and yes, they changed the position, made it a little bit longer, and they found pretty good gains there. So actually, in general, James, it's the bike and the material can offer you a little bit of gains, but for everybody, the position is even more important than the material most of the time.
Which makes this even more interesting because Lionel's chosen a bike that not only is less aerodynamic at the outset, when you put his position into it and his choice of water bottle position, etc., he's actually losing even more, close to 18 watts, which translates to about 7 minutes on this course. Now, how have we worked out that that's costing him 7 minutes? Can we crunch those numbers? What have you done to tell us that it's 7 minutes difference?
I mean, Lionel told us that he's thinking about using the old bike, and that made us work additionally to the science we do in general for our R&D work. And I digitalized the course and split it into little segments and calculated the grades on it. And then we had our own tool, but additionally to that, we went to a PhD in Silicon Valley, Steve Gribble, and asked him for his help because he's had a very good online tool. And we asked him if we can use it. The advantage is you can put straight watts and you get the speed for a segment. This is mathematically pretty crazy, but he managed that. And then, yes, we calculated the speed for each segment, just to show where you have an advantage with a light bike and where you have an advantage with a super aero bike.
Okay, so they've broken down the entire St. George course, 180 kilometers of it, into these little segments. They've worked out how much you're going to gain or lose depending on the weight versus the aerodynamic gain for the two different bikes. And the numbers are pretty, well, damning is probably the right word. There is almost nowhere, in fact, I think the number you gave me was 2 kilometers out of 180 where the lighter bike is going to be faster than the more aerodynamic bike. Is that right?
Yeah, it's an average grade of around 6%, where you really gain with the 875 grams we calculated, where this bike is faster. And the rest of the course, on every flat section, on every downhill section, the super aero bike is faster. And the difference is you gain on these two little segments around 0.2 to 0.3 kph average speed, and you lose on the downhills where they go with 70 kph, 80 kph maybe. You lose up to 2.5 kph to 3 kph on this segment.
Wow, that is big differences. And that's important to note on this course because there aren't many sections that are over 6%. In fact, while there's a lot of climbing over the 180 Ks, most of it is gradual climbing. The average of both of the climbs is it's 1.5% for that long climb up Gunlock Drive, and then it gets up to 3.5% average for the Snow Canyon. There are points which are over 6%, as Wolfie has said, but not very many points. So in almost all points of this course, the more aerodynamic bike is going to be faster. So now you may be scratching your head going, well, hold on. Why is someone like Lionel choosing the slower bike? And that is an interesting question. We're going to get to it in a minute. There's a few more things we need to discuss about this. You say 875 grams is the difference roughly between these two bikes. And you might look at that and go, well, an 8 kg, 9 kg bike, that's nearly 10% difference. That's a big weight saving. And when you climb in a hill, you're going to notice that. But the fact of the matter is, it's not just the bike you're climbing up a hill, it's your whole body and the bike. And when you add those two, the difference is actually closer to 1, maybe 1.5%, which is why the advantage that he's gaining with that lower weight is so minimal when you're going up those climbs.
Yes, and it's also the physics behind it, you know. It's also the speed you go. If you go with 16 kph or 18, you can't gain that much.
No, the momentum, yeah, exactly. It gets more and more confounding the more you look at the numbers, why Lionel would have chosen this bike. We also have to look at his race dynamics. And we have to look at the athlete that Lionel is. He is not the strongest swimmer, so he's probably going to be coming out and he's going to be chasing. And his disadvantage, as we've just spoken about with the aerodynamics, is going to be amplified if there's a group of guys up the front who can relax and work. It's non-drafting, of course, so they can't draft each other, but there is still an advantage being in a group versus someone who's not in a group. And then the real advantage or disadvantage, as it may be, comes in when you are riding with other bikers, because that's when you're going to get that feeling, as you were telling me earlier, of a group pulling away from you on a downhill because of this aerodynamic difference. How much of a difference is that going to be? Is he going to see these guys just pulling away?
I think he can catch up, but he has to invest a lot of energy for that. But Lionel, we have to talk about his strength as well. He's mentally a very, very strong athlete. He's used to catch up on the bike, and maybe he can catch up with these people, but then you have to talk about the energy which are wasted in T2 already then. Yeah,
well, this is what Ironman is, isn't it? Ironman is a challenge of using your energies to get you through the whole distance and saving as much energy as you can for later on, because obviously you want to save as much as you can for the run. And yeah, as Wolfie says, Lionel is maybe the toughest athlete out there. He is really mentally strong. So if he believes in his bike and he's willing to push hard and hurt, he could just hurt that little bit more than the other guys to stay with them on the downhills when they're pushing hard and more aerodynamic than him. And obviously he's going to have a slight advantage or be more comfortable going up the hill. And I think that's one more thing we need to discuss on this. The psychology of Lionel's decision. And I can actually relate to this a little bit because in my career, I had a constant argument with my engineers and my aerodynamicists saying, you need to move your bottle to behind your saddle because behind your saddle is the most aerodynamic. Take it off your frame and put it behind your saddle. But I hated a bottle behind my saddle because as you stand up and you move, that bike moves underneath you and you get that momentum keeping having to shift and the bottle kind of flops around this way and that way and it changes the perception of your bike. And I hated it. And it probably wasn't costing me any time, but I didn't like it. And I took the bottle off behind my saddle and I put it on the frame despite them saying, that's not as aerodynamic. We're not talking about the differences here that Lionel is talking in his decision, but I can understand Lionel's decision here on that regard because Lionel has decided that I feel better on this bike. And that may actually be the deciding factor. On a course like this where it's going to come down to mind over matter. It's going to come down to who's mentally strongest. It's such a tough course, not just on the bike, but also later on the run. Lionel believing that his bike is the best choice may actually be the best choice, may make it the best choice. I know as an engineer, you're looking at the numbers and disagreeing with me, but we do have to factor that in, that there is a mental game too that's going on at the same time. Do you think that there's too much of a disadvantage with the slower bike for him?
I mean, mentality can cover a lot of disadvantages. And we also have the goal to give our athletes and our customers the material they believe in. You know, the last years we worked together with Jan and created our own philosophy about how a bike should look like and what a proper triathlon bikes need. And that's what we came out. And Lionel got a different mindset maybe, but if he's happy with his choice, he at least mentally has a good position on that race. Yeah.
Well, the science says that your more aerodynamic bike, is, even on this course, which is hilly, is going to be faster. But the reality is that you're dealing with humans here, and the perception may be that his bike is faster for him. I certainly love a light bike. My wife used to swear by a light bike. That would be all she would ride. If it was even remotely heavy, she would go, this is too slow, even if the science was telling her that it's more aerodynamic. So I can see his decision making here, but when you're getting down to the nitty gritty, to the pointy end of the field, and where tiny fractions make a big difference, it's quite possible that Lionel Sanders has made the wrong decision. Now, before we wrap up, I am going to say this bike that he is riding is no slouch. The bike that he is riding has actually won the last 5 Ironman World Championships on the men's side, albeit on Kona, which is a slightly less hilly course than this one, but it's no slouch of a bike. It's a fast bike, and there's a very real chance that Lionel Sanders could prove us wrong and still win the Ironman World Champs on the old Canyon Speedmax. Well, we wait to see. We're very excited to watch the whole race and see how it unfolds, and perhaps we'll have Wolfie back after the race, and we'll compare Kyle Smith's bike, who is on the new Canyon Speedmax CFR, versus Lionel Sanders on the SLX, and we can see what they actually did on race day, what numbers they put out, and where they were faster and where they were slower, and we can really crunch those numbers, because I think our viewers will be interested in that. Right now, though, it's time to go and watch the race and see what happens. Thanks for joining us, Wolfie.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you again soon. Remember to subscribe to GTN and hit that like button if you've enjoyed this video.